por estar presentes en esta importante conferencia. Muchas gracias, profesor Smoot, por su visita y por la brillante disertación que brindará esta mañana. Sigamos todos explorando el universo y volando hacia la cúspide. Sigamos todos defendiendo la libertad, llevando al infinito nuestra irrenunciable defensa de la autonomía universitaria. Muchas gracias a todos y bienvenidos a esta conferencia.
Y después de haber escuchado el mensaje del doctor Candelario Ortiz Bueno, secretario general de la UAS, en representación del doctor Robespierre Lizárraga Otero, encargado de la rectoría, les pedimos a los integrantes del Presidium si pueden acompañarnos entre el público para dar paso al inicio de la conferencia a cargo del doctor George F. Smoot. Permítanme leerles parte de la trayectoria del doctor George Smoot. Es un físico estadounidense El doctor George Smoot es un físico estadounidense conocido por su trabajo en cosmología y por haber recibido el Premio Nobel de Física en el año 2006 junto con John Matter, por su trabajo en el estudio de la radiación cósmica de fondo en microondas. Su contribución principal fue el liderazgo en el proyecto COBE, un satélite que estudió una radiación de fondo que es proveniente del inicio y origen del universo. Este descubrimiento fue crucial para la comprensión actual de la estructura del universo. COBE proporcionó evidencia sólida de que el universo se formó a partir de una gran explosión, el famoso Big Bang. El trabajo de Smoot ha sido fundamental en el campo de la cosmología y la comprensión del universo en sus etapas más tempranas. Él y su equipo detectaron variaciones minúsculas en esta radiación, conocidas como anisotropias, que son las semillas de la formación de estructuras en el universo como las galaxias y agrupaciones de galaxias. Smoot ha sido un defensor apasionado de la divulgación científica y ha trabajado para acercar la ciencia a un público más amplio. Su legado en la física y la cosmología es considerable y su reconocimiento con el Premio Nobel resalta su contribución a nuestro entendimiento del universo en sus etapas iniciales. Sin más preámbulo, demos la más cordial bienvenida al doctor Smoot con el tema La cosmología de hoy y la del mañana.
Buenos días. Wait. Muchas gracias por todos. Sí. Yo hablo español un poquito. However, mostly, if I can get my slides, I will give the talk in English, but I have subtitles. So where's the first slide? So I'm measuring the air quality in this room. This is a little thing that Nora and my company do. The slides are here. I don't have to tell you anymore. The air is pretty good. It's not great. I like it down below 8, but it's 17, 18. But it's very good, and you can even see the larger particles, but you can actually see the particles in the air going through here. So anyway, just a little advertisement for one of our products. And also advertisement for Culiacan that the air is good. All right, so let me get on with my talk, okay? And I'm giving a talk, but I'll give you a hint. Some people put on the poster that I was going to talk about cosmology today and tomorrow, things that you'll need to know in a million years. However, it's a harder thing. So the first question, it's a lecture that actually has a test in it. And the first question is, what is the quantum no-cloning theorem, and why did the Chinese invest over $1 billion in instruments to do that? That's the first question tomorrow. Okay, so, but then the hard questions will come. All right, so now let's talk about stuff today. I am trying to get you to realize your world is going to change tremendously. And even though much is for the good, it's still going to be tricky. So there is a famous quote in English, right, which is reputed to be an old Chinese curse. May you live in interesting times. Everyone in this room is going to live in interesting times for at least 2 decades, maybe more, as if you live, but it's going to be, right, at least 2 decades of interesting time coming now. Okay, so it turns out it's a really nice sounding thing and a really kind of a cute thing, and it draws some attention to it, but there's actually no ancient Chinese curse that says that. The closest thing that there is to that I could find, and you can find it on Wikipedia, is it's better to be a dog in tranquil times than a human in times of chaos. Okay, so you'll see that these interesting times are going to be both a blessing and a curse, and they're going to make the way you live change incredibly compared to what you think you're used to. All right, so let's see if I can control things from here. Next slide. Well, that didn't work. Can I have the next slide? Okay. So here's the plan of my discussions. We're in the context of a world that's changing rapidly. For as long as I've known, and from people before that, the world has been changing at an increasing rate, and that rate is getting even higher and higher now. So we face a time when everything's going to change, and you're seeing the first stages of the AI changing your world, along with other powerful and adopted new technologies. So how can that be? You guys see AI around. It doesn't change your life that much, does it? Well, it does already some, but think about this. 10 years ago, did you have a smartphone? Did you have a phone that you carried around in your pocket and you keep all your information on it and you can see what time it is, what the weather's going to be, when the store down the street's going to open, you know, what's happening on a Big Bang Theory? You can see all that stuff. You cannot live without it, and it's been less than 10 years. Okay? AI is at the same stage that smartphones were 10 years ago, except things go faster. So AI is going to change your world very incredibly in less than 10 years. Okay? It already is changing your world, but it's going to be much more and much more substantial than you thought. And that means what you do in the university, what you do in your life has changed. You have to be learning to do new things, you have to be adapting, you have to be doing a lot of things like that. And a really powerful part of the AI is automation, and I'll talk about it in a little bit more detail, but automation is going to be doing your jobs. So you're going to have new jobs and new things, including to professors, which is the scary thing for professors. I was always worried that people would get smart and adopt the new online teaching before I quit being a professor, but now I see like it's a duel and it's going down. It's like newspapers. Newspapers used to be the most important thing. Now newspapers are dying. Soon there will not be newspapers. Right? And overlaid on all of this is climate change, and that climate change is a serious threat to the entire world, and particularly agriculture, and I have a little thing here about viticulture, as an example how climate change is affecting how alcohol is produced, and even in Mexico. And so the fact is, the climate change is already affecting your life. It's going to affect it more. You don't realize what you're doing every day affects a billion people in the world. You know, you drive your truck around in this city, well, it's affecting more than just the city. It's affecting the whole world. And you're seeing the COP 27 or whatever it is going on in Dubai. It's a big fight because some of those countries are going to be gone by the next, viable COP. It's just the way it goes. And so this is going to require multiple adaptations and change in response. And into overlaying all this, we're going to need more energy and more sensors because the AI is going to need to know what's going on, and it's going to need energy to do what it's doing. And you're going to need energy because you're going to like air conditioning because you're going to die if you don't have air conditioning. It's there's simple things. But fortunately, energy is going to be available because there's a lot of selfish stuff. However, I'll show you the energy scale for energy operation and for the support of energy operations. It's a very huge scale. It takes up 10% of the world GDP, and it's going to take up more. I'll give you an example of that. And there's a lot of complex interactions going on between the energy sector. Energy is the lifeblood of our civilization, and the energy sector and the manufacturing sector, and the needs and desires for additional energy for doing additional things. All of these things are coming together in a really major way. And again, next slide. This button is just for show, apparently. Or maybe if I turn it around, it goes the other way. It does work. You'll go back one, please. This is a slide to illustrate the kinds of wonderful new things that are going to happen. And if I can go backwards one. Go back one. There. So we're really approaching a critical threshold to our whole species history. And that threshold is coming in 4 different ways and roughly the same scale. And so if one thing doesn't get you, the other things are going to get you. Okay? Soon you're going to be surrounded by AIs. They're going to organize your life. They're going to operate your business. And they're going to run the core government services. How can they run the government? Well, the answer is they're already doing it in some places. In China, you cannot go to a store or walk across the street or do anything else. Last time I took the train in China, I just walked to the train station. They recognized my face. They knew I had a ticket. They told me what gate to go to. Just say, go to gate such and such. No ticket, no anything. Just go and do it. If you don't have a good citizenship score, you don't get allowed in the train station. You don't get allowed in the airport. So, it's not decided by humans, it's already done. There's an algorithm that keeps track of how well you've behaved, and if you've misbehaved, you don't ever get to travel. You have trouble buying groceries. The government's already run by automation there. In Mexico, it'll take a while, right? But it's going to be happening. Okay, you'll also live in a world which has amazing new things. Printers, 3D printers that print DNA objects, quantum computers, advanced and personalized healthcare. So we're making in the next 20 years the change from being able to do medicine generically to people, giving everybody the same medicine for the same diseases, to where we're going to actually scan and manage your genome and then tailor the medicine for you. And that will happen. One of the things that happened in the last few days is 2 cell genome, I don't know what they're called now, think about treatments, were approved for use in humans. One was for sickle cell, one's from a disease you'd never hear about, but it's doing it. But there are in China 120 diseases for treatments for cell therapy and clinical trials, and in the US a little over that, about 130. So there are going to be a lot of things going on where the treatment is going to be to take your stem cells or some close to stem cells you can get and do genetic modification and fix the disease in you, including arthritis and including diabetes. Those are things that you can do. So those are great things. They're going to be very disruptive. What you're going to see is if things change rapidly, it upsets your life. If they change for the worse, it upsets you more, but if they change for the better, it still upsets you. So you got to be prepared for a world that's going to change really substantially. Okay? You also, with that same technology, can engineer pathogens and autonomous weapons. And any of you paying attention to two of the 3 wars that are going on right now, the major wars that are going on right now, where lots of people are dying, we'll realize the technology of the weapons is increased incredibly, and you get obviously seeing drones playing a major role in 2 of the 3 big wars that are going on right now. And many other things, including advanced artillery, advanced missiles, all those things are going on. And even the third-rate power, like the Houthi, are shooting at ships, right? It's a really changed world. The technology that makes it easier if you do things in your ordinary life, make it easier for things to go on in wars that are things that you don't really care for. Okay, now we're gonna have robot assistants. I'll give you some examples of that. There are a lot of robot assistants. One of the things that's already happened in mining is that all the big mining machines and all the big dump trucks do not have humans in them. They're all automated because humans are too dangerous to expensive equipment. If you could do that for airplanes, you would do it too, because the robots make less mistakes than the humans do, and they're more careful. And so it's whatever. And we're going to have abundant energy. I had in the next slide that I messed up. A tokamak that's operating, but there's many different ways where we're going to have a lot more energy available. The problem is we're going to need the infrastructure for using that new energy, and that is basically double the mining in the world. And the mining in the world is already 80% of the mining that it can be. And so it's really a big deal what's going to happen, right? So nobody is prepared for what's going to happen. Nobody in this room, not me for sure, and I've been seeing it happen. I've been paying attention. I've been seeing it happen. But this stuff is so rapid and so substantial, I can't quite see how things are going to work. I can see how upset people are going to be, but it's what's it. So this coming decade is going to be defined by this wave of new technologies, and they're powerful, and they're proliferating very fast, and they're going to take over what we do. And you know, where I come from, Silicon Valley, they like the disruptive, take over the world, make a new thing. You know, where was Uber 10 years ago, right? Well, it was there, but it was hardly anything. But now it's disrupted the taxi industry and so forth. Okay, so the question is going to be, for your mental and emotional stability and for the world, can we take that narrow path between catastrophe on the one side and dystopia on the other side? It's not going to be easy, right? So this is the challenge that faces you. This is why I'm giving you this talk today, so that understanding the universe will actually be obviously simple compared to understanding what's going to happen in society here. All right, let's see if I can do this again. Yeah, I'm not. All right. Yeah, I went the wrong way. There we go. So this is just a cartoon sketch, and it unfortunately the labels goes off the top. What's happening in the world? We're going to have robots, and I pick the famous Boston robotics dog, which is scary, right? Because it can carry heavy packs and run up and down stairs and do stuff. They got a better one that works in a warehouse that can throw packages up on high shelves, you know, and climb them down. I mean, it's scary when you see those, right? At least Nora says they're scary. And there's biotech. We're in the business now of finally doing medicine and biotechnology the correct way, down at the genome level, and we're looking at the DNA, the RNA, and the proteins. And from that, we can make new drugs, but we can make new treatments, and eventually we'll be able to actually fix what's wrong with people in a very straightforward way. It's expensive now, whatever. The next one in the middle is a tokamak. It promises abundant energy because the fuel that it uses is very available on the Earth. Solar cells, but they don't work so well at night. You know, you have to have energy storage. That requires a lot of metal and a lot of mining and so forth. And quantum computing, which threatens to scare us all. Down here in the bottom left is a woman representing generative AI. That is AI that's composing music, writing and showing you movies, and all this kind of thing, right? That's why there were the big writers and actor strikes going on, because they understand their jobs are a threat. That being a movie star, why pay for a flaky movie star when you can have an AI-generated system that's really good, right? and probably emotes better. So we'll see what happens. And so you can make music, you can make beautiful art, you can write literature, you can do, and poetry too. You can do those things with generative AI now. And the question is, how good are those compared to humans? And the answer is, even though they only have about 1/100th the number of synapses that humans do, the AI is doing about as good as a good human. Right? It's now. But just wait a few years and see how good it is. A few years, I mean, like 2 or 3. Right. Okay, can I try again? All right, one more. Yeah. Thank you. So I'm going to give an example of automation. So my definition of automation is you're doing more stuff with less. That means mostly you do more stuff with less people, right? Right now it's quite possible, it's been possible for 5 years, to have 1 or 2 good doctors and a whole bunch of chatbot, basically small but talking things, who give a diagnosis and prescription better than 85 to 90% of doctors. So you just need the very top doctors to cross-check and provide it, and then you'll be better than 99.9% of doctors. And right, and that chatbot, you can make a class of chatbots, say run off 100 of them, in 6 months. To run off 100 new doctors takes 7 years, right? And you need a medical school. And so, why hasn't we done this already? Because it's been available, the technology's been available for 5 years. Well, the answer is people are slowing this process down. This process is coming so fast that doctors can't get out of the way. They can't change the system. They don't know how to do it. Right? Okay, so autonomous vehicles. Now, this is not a popular topic in Kulikan. Everybody loves their car or their SUV, and they're driving around and they think it's just the greatest thing. That's a mistake. That's a mistake because people have gotten well off here and they're copying what happened in the USA some years ago. Now, the problem is that you shouldn't have human beings driving. It should be only autonomous vehicles, in which case you need many fewer cars because you ride share. And so there'd be lower auto sales. There'll be lower, auto insurance premiums. So people selling auto insurance, they're going to lose their jobs. There will be a consolidation of the auto industry. There'll be a mobility as a service that is, there is already companies in San Francisco that are running automated taxis. And you just punch in your smartphone where you are and where you want to go, and it comes and picks you up and it goes. And you don't worry about who the driver is, because there's no driver. They just come and they drive around, right? And their accident rate is an order of magnitude less than humans. Okay. So why do you let humans drive around and kill people? Well, we have a higher standard for machines than we do for humans. We let humans do all kinds of stupid stuff, but we wouldn't let machines do, right? And so 10 times is not enough. 100 times is enough, right? I mean, if I were going to get surgery and I had to choose between a human doctor and one of the robotic surgeons, I suspect I would choose a robotic surgeon because there's probably 10 or 15 of them running all the time, and he's done thousands of operations, whereas any doctor probably at best has done 100, right? So it takes a really good doctor, really skilled doctor with that kind of a practice to be better than the robot, and it's just not the case. So what I've seen now is there's a person overseeing it, but the robot is doing the actual surgery, and they don't cut you open. They run stuff up in through the wires and stuff up in through there, and it's a very different kind of medicine that we're going to see happening. Okay, so delivery costs are going to go down too, because why have paid truck drivers? You just have the robot vehicle drive up to the place, the little robot thing come out and drop it on your front porch so people can steal it. Because right now the driver does that, and so you can replace those, but it runs the cost down, right? And the same thing is true in other industries, including agriculture, and I'll give an example of it. So we're gonna see a big change in what kind of jobs are jobs that humans are best suited for. You gotta find something that a robot can't do, or you've got to be ready for a change in the structure of society. Okay, so I give examples that robots are going to be man's best friend as long as you're on the, it's better to own the robot than to compete with the robot. So you should own the robot factory, a really good robot factory, not a bad one. And that's a much better, use of your assets. So I'm going to give a couple examples from agriculture because I happen to have some slides, including a laser weeder. So it's, that you think that would be worth it, but it's worth it because people use it and they come out ahead and they measure very carefully because they do what's going on. Manufacturing, there are fully automated production lines. One of the colleagues that I was trying to talk to this morning but I couldn't reach is running an automated drug testing line. So cells are taken, tissue cells are taken, passed in through to the robots grind the cells up, put them in the things, do the test, run them down the sequence, and they can do hundreds of them a day, and much more than a human can. So how about restaurants, right? Well, actually, it turns out 7 years ago, I went to an automated restaurant in Harbin, China. There's a company that was building robots, and they decided they'd put a restaurant out just to advertise. And it was cool, and the kids loved it, right? Because they were these two robots behind the thing cooking. They were cooking noodles and various kinds of Chinese food. And then they would put it on the counter, and the robot deliverer would come, and they'd push it onto his head, and it ran down the thing to the table, and the table, the same height as the table, pushed onto the table, and there it was. That was 100% automated, right? It's maybe the preparation of the foods to be cooked ahead of time. They came in big frozen packages. I'm not sure. But that was 7 years ago. Do you understand now there's a robot called Flippy, who does not only French fries, but also does hamburgers, hamburguesas. Not just ordinary hamburgers, but good hamburguesas. And so the jobs that were jobs that people thought were guaranteed jobs, they're not, because they're going to be done by things that don't mind doing them, right? They don't mind doing that work and don't charge much. And healthcare. And so I mentioned the surgeons, but there's not only the chatbots that do diagnosis, and the surgeons who are robotic surgeons and doing it in a much more sophisticated way than cutting people down and prying them open. That does not happen anymore. It's a very different thing. But there are robots that do surgery. There are robots that are not visible as robots, but they help. All the medical imaging is done is interpreted by AI systems, and they're much better at finding tumors and much better at finding various objects than humans are, and especially in 3D imaging, right, when you do 3D imaging. And so already there's a tremendous amount of AI in healthcare, and the healthcare regulation systems haven't caught up with that. It's being applied, but they don't have rules about it. So that's the kind of a thing that's going on. So I haven't got your attention yet, right? Used to think that being a doctor or a lawyer or, a burger maker were guaranteed good jobs. Well, sorry, there are no guaranteed good jobs like that. Okay, so here I'm going to give an example of industry because I happened to give a brief talk over the internet to a group, and that was a group that was worried about the alcohol industry, and I said, you should be paying attention because climate change is really changing the agricultural business. And if you project, I'm going to give you this example, but if you project out, roughly 1/4 to 1/2 of all crops are going to go out of existence because the climate change is not going to let them continue. Right? So basically, humans-driven climate change is going to eliminate about half the plant species in the world in the very short order. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to talk about is beer, because I know some people in Mexico like the cerveza. And there is a famous town in Germany called Spattler, and they're famous because they have Spattler hops. Well, the Spattler hops isn't growing so well anymore. The climate has changed, and instead of having 1 or 2 bad years every decade, they've been having more bad years than good years. Now, if your beer is named Spattler beer, what do you do? You know, are you gonna have to genetically modify the Spatler hops or do that? So that upper right-hand corner, that's a Spatler hop. The first two, the first picture and the second picture, are close-up of the hops and then of the hop vines. And so already climate change is affecting the alcohol industry quite substantially. And it's particularly affecting wines because the thing that gives wine its nuance and its subtlety and so forth has to do with what the ratio of the heat and the water and the coolness of the nights, all these things affect the taste of a wine. That's what makes it wine rich when you're drinking and so forth. Well, if you look, since 1988, they're having to harvest 13 days earlier than average. That's just an indication of how the climate change is going on, just crept up on people. They didn't even pay attention. It just, you know, you look and it's that way. It's the same way when I was a child, we used to have a river that froze over and there would be a lottery on when the ice would break and flow down. Well, you can look at what month, what day the lottery is, and it's been moving back, right? The world's getting warmer, and it's just no question about it. And so wine is going to be very affected. So you either got to adjust your system in the way you grow wine, or you're going to have to plant different varietals. You're going to have to move from the varietals that like the cooler weather to the ones that like warmer weather. And that means a different taste, a different flavor. However, one that should, unfortunately, falling off the bottom of my screen, I don't know, over there, why is tequila and mezcal under threat? Because of climate change. I mean, it's you know, the agave, they grow in the desert. You know, what's a little bit more heat? Well, the answer is there's tremendous demand these days. Tequila and mezcal are under big demand. The price is up. They're planting more of these plants. And the problem is they're not growing right. And why is they're not growing right? Well, it turns out they need the Mexican long-nosed bat to just like, you know, other plants need bees, they need the Mexican long-nosed bat to fertilize them, and the Mexican long-nosed bat is under threat. So the university should have some biologists studying that and some engineers studying how to make little drones that they can sell to the mezcal industry to go and fertilize the plants for them. It's a problem, right? You know, some of you probably like tequila or mezcal, right? Well, how are you going to feel when there isn't any more, right? It's you're messing with my stuff. Okay. Still didn't work. Okay, I better pick it up without the clicker, without the button to push. I'm in trouble. Could I have the next slide? Next. Here we go. All right. So robots are already taking over vineyards. This picture down the bottom is one of the kind of robots you can buy. It's already in vineyards. It has a lot of sensors on it. It has solar cells, so it can be doing that. It has a little electric motor, so it can drive around between the rows of the grapes. And it has a lot of sensors. Infrared sensors. It does 3D stereoscopic machine vision, right? So one of the great advances in AI is vision, machine vision, and the progress there has been tremendous. And so they go up and down the vines and they look at each one and look in the infrared and they look in the ultraviolet, they look in the optical, and they measure the growth and they measure the temperatures, they measure all the things, and they see how the vines are doing and feedback how fast the grapes are doing. So that's a pretty standard little robot, and a lot of places are using these kinds of things now. On the right side is a soil robot. It goes down over the vines and then it stick in and measures the water content, and measures the soil acidity, it measures the various properties of the soils around the vines, and therefore sees what's going on and how, you know, what needs to be done, how much more water might be needed depending on what's going on. Okay, the next slide. I'm going too slow, so we have to pick it up. Okay, push the button again. Good. Okay, this is a stupid machine, right? But it's got sensors high and low, and it goes out and looks at the vines every day. It goes up and down the rows, measures the vines, keeps track of all the data, and then it's feeding that back into the system that's measuring how the overall vineyard is doing. Well, you know, you could build that here, right? You could do that for, it's not that complicated machinery. What's complicated was the AI to figure out how to drive up and down the rows and how to do that. And that's not that hard anymore with the progress and the vision of what's going on. Next. Okay, and here's what I promised, the laser weeding and trimming. Okay, so this little machine on the left, it kind of looks like a little tractor, and it's got a bar on it. And at the end of the bar, you'll see it has this little hooded section. It drives this little hooded section over. It has video sensors in it. It sees the weed. It zaps the weed with the laser. That's what you see on the right. Okay? So why does that make sense? Why do you weed your garden? Why do you particularly weed the vineyard? Well, weeds take up nutrients. They take up water. They take off minerals out of the soil. They slow down the growth of the crops. If you want to get the maximum grape yield for your wine, you get rid of the weeds. Now, it turns out it's not just for grapes. There's even, for really big farms, you can get drones that fly around with vision systems on it and zap weeds, right? So, depends on what you're trying to grow. Next. Okay, so here's an example of other use of drones for precision viniculture. So there are two figures on here. One shows the vineyard. You can see the rows of the vines, and it's color-coded in the infrared, so you can see where the water is. You know, what the leaves with more water in them show up more red. The leaves with less turn up more yellow. You can see the water distribution. You can see what's going on. And the one in the bottom is actually telling you how much you're getting in grapes. You can see where the places are where the grapes are growing the best and the most, and where the places where you need extra attention, or you want to make your land more like that in order to be able to grow in the future. So already in agriculture, what I would call advanced sensors and robotics, AI systems, are making a big change in the way they're going. And they have to for viticulture because climate change is threatening the grapes. Next. Okay, how about this? This is for the vice rector and other people. You know, what's the new university? So I give two examples, which I mentioned to them yesterday. Professor Pierre Binetri and I taught a 10-week online course hosted by FUN, which is the French version, and by FutureLearn, which is a British system that runs courses over the internet. Okay, and the course was gravity, and we had reverse classroom. That is, we were live. We recorded the lectures, but we were live for discussion and for experiments and for other things. Plus, we had online TAs that were there around the clock to answer questions by email and so forth. And so we ran this over 3 semesters, starting with 6 weeks, then 8 weeks, and then 9 weeks in the course as we developed the course more. And we had over 90,000 students pass the final exam for those, finish the courses and get a little certificate, take the exams, because we had quizzes every week and we had a final exam and so forth. And if you look at that, 90,000 students times a few hours a week for 8 or 9 weeks, that is half of my student interaction over 40 years. I've been teaching for 40 years, but you have 90,000 students. Now, I remember Pierre wrote me an email. He says, "Oh my God, 56,000 people have signed up already. What are we going to do?" And I said, "Great, advertise it. We want more," because once you get to a large number of students, more it's not incrementally more expensive. And I was hoping we'd break a record, but in fact, there are 2 courses now that broke. There was one course that was live then, which was how to be a refugee in England. They just beat us by a little bit. And then I have a colleague in Hong Kong who teaches the chemistry of cooking, and he's taught that class several times, and he's up over 100,000. So it's kind of thing. So that is the thing that the university realizes, is that you can reach many more people that way. What I'm saying in the future with AI and with virtual reality stuff, you can teach students individually. The AI can interact with the student directly and provide stuff, and it'll be hands-on. The most powerful way you can learn, reverse classroom I think is good, but the most powerful way you can learn is to do something. The second most powerful way you can learn is to do something by simulation. That you think you're in virtual reality, like, you know, in the Matrix, and you think you're doing the things, and you learn it pretty well in that situation. Okay, so recently, about 2 months ago, I gave a lecture on using how successful AI was becoming, on using AI to discover and bring new pharmaceutical, that's new drugs, to human use. And at that time, 2 months ago, at that time, there had been 2 companies that had bucked the trend in the pharmaceutical industry, the discovery of drugs, the clinical trials, the licensing, and the tracking of everything. All of that takes 12 to 14 years on average, has not increased with the digitalization or whatever it is, and it costs between $1 and $2 billion. This one company brought a new drug to human use in 2 years, discovered it, did the clinical trials, and brought it to human use in 2 years. And the other one did it in a year and a half, but it was an orphan drug where it cured a disease in which there are no other drugs to do it. So you get expedited if you can cure things that nobody else can, and so forth. So I was there with Michael Levitt. He gave the talk before me, and I gave the next talk. And I said, I was a little surprised that there was only, you know, between 500 and 1,000 people in the audience. You know, it wasn't much bigger than that. It was a little less big than this. So there's still some empty seats, Lamar. You owe me the survey. The issue is, you know, that was who was present at dinner. They have a dinner, a celebratory dinner at the end of that day, which they called a banquet, and you sit at this big round table, and they serve a whole lot of dishes and stuff. And the people running it came all excited, and they said, "We just got a government contract to do this again for 3 more years," right? And I said, "All right, well, if you want to give me a contract, you know, if you'll pay me a lot of money, I'll come and, you know, and do that." And he said, "You got 270,000 people watching you online, and they watched your whole talk and gave it high ratings." And so, you know, they asked me to sign a contract to come back and give the talk again. I say, pay me money, I will come, because it was actually very interesting. It was a very interesting talk to give, because it's led me to understand where the biotechnology industry is going, that in terms of what's going on. And, but I'll say something else, and this is embarrass Nora. There is an online app called Duolingo, okay? Duolingo teaches more languages to more people than all the universities and all the high schools in the world. Nora's been taking French for quite some time, and she's actually gotten good at it. That's how I know to say, yo hablo español un poquito. You know, I have been taking I have to get back to it. I haven't done it for 4 or 5 days. I find if I'm doing it every day, I make progress. So it is clear the way we do education is going to change very dramatically. And what we should be teaching students is something else. So next slide. This I woke up in the middle of the night to do. How do I say next slide? Okay, so I started thinking, what are the university's scientific missions? And my instinct was, it's to transfer scientific discoveries, technological advances, and cultural growth to society. Right? Now, I didn't say that quite right in Spanish because I was editing it while I was doing it. I didn't do the Spanish. And if you look and see what a university thinks it wants to do, it's to provide a liberal education. This has been the goal since medieval times. There was the idea in medieval times that the person with a liberal education should be a person who learns about the world as a whole and how they can make a better world and be a better person in the world and understand new stuff and continue to learn. And actually, I find that very admirable. I think that's a great thing. But it's going to be more than that. You also have to teach people how to live in the new world. Yeah, and the new world is coming whether we like it or not. You know, people in Europe tried to put some constraints on AI. It's just going to hurt them, but I'll explain why if I have time. The university should conduct research because it should be adding to the knowledge and cultural base of society and then spreading that out through the students. And it should contribute to society, including the economy and the culture. And so these are things that actually make a certain amount of sense, but it's a lot harder when the world is going to be changing so rapidly. Okay, all right. So again, I focus on the medieval, let's go back. Did I push the button? No. Here we go. So you want to help make worthy citizens in this new world, but you're going to want to help make the new world because there's lots of ways the new world can be made that are not good. There's only a few in which the new world is good for everyone, right? So the mission for making a liberally educated person is to give them some community, give them some curriculum that is make sure they know the base of knowledge and pedagogy. And, you know, unfortunately, I tried to use my own computer, but it still made the slides go stretched. But you're trying to produce people who are going to know their own self-worth and are going to try and contribute to making a better world. Because robots are going to be doing most of the work, and it's a question of how do we set the world up so that the robots make the world we want. That's the issue. So next. Okay, so let me give you an example about energy. And this will tell you, there's two lessons. The first thing I'm showing you on this plot is how expensive energy is. This is a plot from 1900 up supposedly to 2030. Unfortunately, when I made this, the war in Gaza had not, the Israel-Hamas war had not started. So I put in this little extra spike in red in order for you to understand what's happening. If you look at this, you can see that for a long time, the energy budget of the world was about 2% of its GDP. That is, for a very long time, it's 2%. And then suddenly, in 1973, exactly 50 years ago, from October 7th of this year, there was a big jump to where first went up to about 7%, and then all the way up to 12% of the GDP of the world was being spent on energy. Because energy is like blood. If society doesn't have energy, everything starves. Right? You can't run your electric appliance, you can't do anything. And there was a big crisis again. Whoops. Did I do that? All right, well, we'll stop here. Well, I'll keep talking, so I don't want to change it. There was a big crisis again in roughly 2010, and there was a constraint, and the price of oil went way up, primarily oil doing it, and then people substitute other sources of energy, and the prices of everything go up. And then when Putin, had Russia invade Ukraine, the price of oil went way up to 13%, and it was starting down, and that curve was projecting when it was going to go down. And then the new war, additional war started, and it's coming up. And so what is that teaching us? Even when there should be a smooth change, when there's instability or when there are political power structures that can go on, you get instabilities in the system. So not only do you get major changes, but you get big oscillations in what goes on. That's why it's going to be a really interesting time you're living in, because you're going to see not only major changes, but big oscillations because of major changes. It's like, you're grabbing a rope and shaking it. Well, sometimes weird things happen, right? So here's the plot that shows the global energy consumption by source from 1800 to this year, right, to 2023. And what you can see is, if you're a college student, during your lifetime, 40% of the excess CO2 was released into the atmosphere. Because you can see the increase, people want more energy. They want to drive the SUVs around. They want to, have air conditioning. They want all that. The energy use has been growing nearly exponentially. It's been growing typically 4 to 5% per year, year in, year out. And the poorer countries want to have the energy levels that the richer countries do. And so there's a little bit extra demand. So there has just been a growth in it. And if you look, you'll see coal is growing. You'll see oil is growing. You will see natural gas is growing. And the other things that don't emit so much CO2, they're growing too. But everything is growing. Okay? That's a key issue. Let's see if this will work again. Right? But in my lifetime, about 90% of the CO2, the extra CO2 that's been emitted has been emitted. So I get in trouble for that. But I'm less than 2.5 times worse than you guys. And I've been around a long time. So it's an issue to realize the demand for energy is growing immensely, and even though we're making a lot more clean energy, it's going to take 20 years till we're going to be at least supplying a big fraction with clean energy. And that means if you live on an island like Samoa, you're history. You're going to go extinct. You're going to move or go extinct. Next slide. Okay, and here's the blown up detail that shows you more detail about coal. Coal was supposed to be topping, but it's not. And I was in China for the World Forum on Conversion to Clean Energy. They're still building one coal-fired plant every week because they have the crews to be building enough coal. They have enough crews to build coal-fired plants. They can build one every week, get one finished every week. And they only have enough crews to build one new nuclear power plant per month. So there's going to be 4 times as many coal-fired plants. And they're going to keep doing that right up to 2050, even though they're promising they're going to cut things down. So if you look, nuclear is supposed to grow, but it's not growing so much as a fraction. Gas is growing because we're doing more, and coal, and oil too. And Mexico's got its hand in this thing, right? Was Mexico voting at the COP for phasing out fossil fuels, or is it voting to delay the phasing out of fossil fuels? Well, we can kind of guess, because the budget of the country depends upon that oil, right? Okay. All right. Whoops, I went too far. Oh, wait a minute. There we go. All right. So the real issue here is that crises are coming. Some are already here. I made a prediction some months ago that for the next 20 years, there'll be never less than 2 major world crises going on. Never less than 2. 4 is okay. It meets the not less than 2 criteria. And right now, we have 3 or 4, depending on how you do your counting, right, in terms of what's happening. Okay, so we're going to have bigger challenges and more difficult choices because you have multiple things going on. And there's no simple solutions to broken systems. You actually have to change society in a number of ways to do that. So, and society is going to change one way or another, right? The consequences are going to be either a lot of people die or a tremendous number of people die. It's not going to be, those are the kind of choices that we're going to have. And it's certainly going to be unpleasant for some countries, right? Fortunately, this area is moderately protected, but it's not completely protected, but it's responsible for things that are happening in other places of the world. So it's a tricky thing to have to think about because the problems are indivisible. Humans have gotten to the point where problems that used to be local problems are now global problems, right? It used to be you had a trash dump and that was your problem, right? It was your local trash dump. But now the world is our trash dump, and we have to worry about things because we have Chinese fishing boats coming out, scouring the ocean, and actually starting to make certain kinds of fish, looking like they're going to go extinct, right? They're overfishing so badly that a lot of the seafood that we're going to get is going to start disappearing, and they're already moving to the second tier kinds of C proteins. And that's a problem that's going on everywhere. But, right here, you kind of like seafood. And luckily, it's partly protected here in the Gulf of Cortez, but you still care about some of the stuff that's out in the Pacific. And that's an issue. And so the only effective thing is going to be somehow the world has to figure out how to do it. The stuff you're doing here is affecting people in Bangladesh or in Samoa or in some other place like that. It's, it's just the way it is. Right? So Confucius say this, I gave this part of the talk in China, so Confucius say, made it on there. Success depends upon previous preparation, and without such preparation, there's sure to be failure, right? Now the question is, what kind of failures are we going to have? Because we're going to have some failures. There's no avoiding that because we got the system driving so hard and we're not making adjustment to it because some people just know how to do what they were doing. Right? Let's see if I can go next. Okay, so here's the point. Here's the math. All that we're going to do is, and I put this in honor of Nora, but this is one of the smartest persons that ever lived. And this guy, you guys should have heard of him, but maybe you haven't. And his name was John von Neumann. And he was famous first as a mathematician, and he made contributions at several different fields of mathematics. He met these Japanese mathematicians, and they said, there's a paper that's the most important paper in our field, and we call it John von Neumann's onion, because he has so many parentheses in it, it looks like an onion. And I'm going, I knew him from other things. He would have gotten, had he lived longer, he would have gotten the Nobel Prize in economics because he invented game theory. I don't know if any of you guys ever studied economics, but game theory is a key thing. John Nash got the Nobel Prize in economics for making a non-equilibrium game theory version of von Neumann's game theory. He extended the game theory. So von Neumann would have clearly gotten the Nobel Prize, in my opinion, for that. But he did a lot of other things. He did many other things that we should know about. But one of the things he did was he coined the term the singularity. And I was very impressed by this. And actually, some years ago, I helped with the founding of Singularity University, which didn't quite get as advanced as I want. But the concept is simple. The accelerating progress of technology will challenge the way you live your life. And the rate of technological change is increasing with time, and it's been usually 2 or 3% per year, right? And as long as that happens, there comes a time in which the rate of change of technology is such that no human can keep up with it, right? And that's very simple. You can understand this for the little bit of math. If inventing something new depends on how much information and science you already have, you're building on what you have before. It's proportional to itself. So that will grow with a power law or an exponential, and it's just a question of what the time scale of the exponential is. So that's the case. So we're coming to the point where changes in our society will happen faster than human beings can react. That's why you need your AI avatar to handle your interface to the world, because you can't be as fast as your avatar. Okay, so the key issue here is the singularity. Now, in physics, we have some tricks with singularities. We have singularities like the mass of an electron or whatever it is, because if you have an electric field, it goes down to a point, it's infinite. But you can subtract that away, and then you can get answers that are what you measure and so forth. So that's a singularity, but not an essential one, because you can remove it by tricks. I don't trust it, but imagine you have to divide 0 by 0. What's the answer? Well, it depends on how the zero, how the zeros depend on other things. So one zero could be proportional to epsilon squared, and the other in proportion to epsilon. And as you scale epsilon down to 0, right, it's either 0 or infinity, depending on which was top or bottom. But you have to know that. But it can be much more complicated than that. But there are some singularities that you cannot remove or ignore. And that's what this singularity, Von Neumann understood this is what we call an essential singularity. It's a problem we have when we try and reconcile quantum mechanics and gravity, for example. There are things that you just can't remove the singularity. It's just intrinsic and screws things up. And that's what the situation is that we're facing. So if you've never heard of von Neumann, learn about him. He really was one of the smartest men ever, perhaps the smartest man ever. And he was Hungarian, so that makes her proud. Okay. Next. Okay, so here's the part that's making all the news now, but this is actually not critical. It just speeds up the end of the, it just makes the singularity get closer. This is what we call the intelligence explosion. So technology has been increasing at an accelerating rate, even with just human brains and the buildup of knowledge and technologies and so forth. Invent the microwave, or you already had the microwave door and the klystron and the whatever. It's not so hard to do that when you have all the pieces lying around, you just put it together, right? It's a lot harder if you're a caveman and you've got to invent the microwave. You don't have the basis. So the growth is just going exponential. The question is, can it get faster? And the answer is, if you can have AI that's smarter than people, then you can go faster. And the singularity can come quicker, right? And so that's the thing that everybody's scared about now, but they should have been scared anyway before this. And that is, can we make AI that amplifies human intelligence, that is, it's smarter than people? And if that CI gets to where it's smarter than people, can it seed the development of these technologies so fast that we have super intelligent AI, and it can just go whoosh, and it's done, right? And we don't know what happens to human society. So that's the question. So I have little graphs on the bottom that I want to show you in the next slide. Next slide, please. Yeah. Here's a plot that just sort of shows it up. And here it's got labels on it. This is just basically number of computing flops. That is, how many bits do you flip per whatever, when you're doing it as a human or as a whatever it is. And you can see that around 2010, our computers got to have the same capability as a mouse brain. And about next year or the year after, the computer should have as much flops as a human brain. And if we stay on the same curve, by 2045, we should have as many flops as the entire human race. There should be a machine that for 1,000 pounds of money can do as much computing as the entire human race. So it's not only that it's as smart as everybody in the world combined, it is cheaper than everybody in the world combined. So that's a projection on when the singularity might be. This is old. That projection is actually a little bit older one, but I put it on there just for you to see it. It's a question of when that's going to happen. We stayed on this curve over 100 years. It's almost 150 years that we've been on this curve. We're not falling off that curve that fast. So there are going to be computers that have the capability to be as smart as the whole human race within 30 years, within 20 years probably. We'll see. Right? So next slide. Next slide. All right, I'll skip on this one. This is a scorecard from the Electrical Engineers Computer Society on what kind of new technologies versus benefit of what's going on. And the thing that you probably don't realize is that human wearables for monitoring your health and your well-being actually have come in to where they've penetrated the market. I'm wearing one, you don't think anything about it. Many people have smartwatches or other devices that keep track of their health and well-being, how much exercise they get, what calories they eat, all this kind of stuff. That's been a big advance. That's something that is really something good for humans and is well adapted, right? That's the kind of things going on. The autonomous driving is just in the full adapting phase, and in a few years in all the big cities, it's going to be autonomous driving. It's not going to be people drive around the traffic like you have here. The next slide. I don't want to spend time going on all this because I've run way over already. Okay, so let me talk about the height. This is a very famous curve. This is what's called the hype curve. This is for almost all new technologies, there's a hype curve. There is, when people that innovate it start talking about it and say how great it is, and they over push it, they oversell it. The generative AI, the ChatGPT, which many people I know are using, and I use a little bit, it's in the peak of the hype curve. In a time period which is, on a scale of 5 to 10 years, it will be up on the plateau of actual productive usefulness, right? But it's got to go through a disillusionment phase before that. But computer vision is already coming up on the plateau. Computer vision is successful. Cars can drive around, robots can go around, big trucks can drive around. Computer vision is successful now. And it's good. If you're a blind person, it helps a lot, and we'll see what's going on. But you'll see there's a lot of other stuff that's already starting to come up the curve, and that's an indication that the AI is already here. It's already affecting you. You don't notice that. Just like you don't notice which cell tower your phone is connecting to. The AI takes care of that. Well, it's not a very smart AI, but it doesn't, right? But there's a lot of other stuff. So you all have noticed how when you look up a product or something, you certainly got a lot of ads for that. Okay, so the issue with AI is who's the product and who's the service and what's going on. The AI is going to be driven by companies because they can make more money, they can make more sales, they can do more stuff, and it's going to be driven by countries. There is a big race going on right now between basically East and West Bloc on whose AI is going to win, because whoever has the best AI, their economy will grow 2-3% per year faster than the other bloc, and they will come to dominate. Right? It's the strategy that China has been using. Trying to take over the sea, trying to do other stuff, trying to take over the manufacturing. It's a big issue in terms of what's going on. Fortunately for us, there's a failure in China. Xi Jinping thinks he's better than he is, and he's made a bunch of mistakes. Next. Okay, so there are disruptive technologies. There are advances that will transform your life, your business, the global economy, right, and lots of other things. And I have a little thing, but I decided to cut it out because I'm running over. There are 12 emerging technologies that are really changing things worldwide now, and they're going to change the thing on the scale from 10% of the world's economy to 3 or 4 times the world economy, depending on which technology you're talking about. So the next slide shows the mobile internet, which you don't even think about. The mobile internet is basically increased by 2 years from now to where it's equal to the whole GDP of the world today. It's growing immensely, and it's been growing immensely, so it's just going up there, and it's not going to stop. But there's the automation of knowledge work. That is doctors, lawyers, just the kind of people who do that is going to become a really big business. You can replace all those kinds of things. So that's pretty good. The autonomous vehicles, which I was talking about before, that's only adding about 10% to the economy, right? Well, that's still pretty impressive because it's coming up really fast. It's coming from almost 1% or less of the economy to 10% of the economy almost overnight. Next, I want to focus on this one, because this is one of the things I think that Sinaloa Universidad should be, Universidad de Sinaloa, should be doing, looking at the next generation genomics. There are really fast and low-cost gene sequencing and advanced analytics and synthetic biology that are available now. You can do things now you can't do. You can modify plants. You can modify a tree so that it grows more quickly, has more uniform wood. It can use less water. It can do that. Now, it takes a lot of effort, but you can also modify bacteria that will make a drug for, I'm trying to think. It's mosquito-borne diseases in Africa mostly, but in which there's not enough money for the big pharmaceuticals to do it, but you can then mass produce this drug, and it would be very cheap. You could get much less than 10 to 20 pesos per dose per person, and they can live in the malaria-infested you can live in the malaria-infested areas and not worry about it in the future. And that's going to be an issue as the climate change. Parts of Mexico will have malaria. It's a kind of thing. So this is something that's basically, adding significantly to the world economy, but truly adds to the benefit, that is to make the world a better place, that you can treat diseases and treat things in ways you couldn't before, but there also can be misused to make bad things happen. So next, I guess I'm going to be getting to the end. I don't remember what time it is. Next. Okay, I think. Okay. All right. Well, I wasn't going to go this far. Wait, I need instructions from the acting rector here. Should I stop or should I say something about this? Stop? Tell them how to win the Nobel Prize? It's actually pretty easy. But one of the... you have a better chance... That's not to say that it isn't hard work, but it isn't so hard to do. You just got to do the hard work. It's the hard thing. All right, here to follow up on what I was saying before are two Nobel laureates that I knew before they got the Nobel Prize because they were at Berkeley. Carolyn Bertozzi, she was head of the molecular foundry. Their job was to make interesting molecules and stuff, and then she got hired away to Stanford when it was clear she was doing great stuff, because Stanford likes to bring people in so they can get the Nobel Prize. And she got this for click chemistry, right? And it's interesting because it's both biology and chemistry. And on the right-hand side are Jennifer Doudna, who is a professor at Berkeley, and Emmanuelle Charpentier. Emmanuelle Charpentier didn't have a job when she got her Nobel Prize. Well, she's a little obnoxious to get along with, so it's partly understandable, but it's a funny kind of thing. She's French, so you have to understand it. But they got the Nobel Prize for the discovery of CRISPR-Cas9, which is the thing that bacteria and do to protect themselves against viruses. They can snip out a part of DNA and replace it with another gene sequence. And that has made it possible for us to think of doing these gene treatments, the gene therapy, where we go and treat people. And if you have arthritis, we take the arthritis gene out and put in a gene that corrects and makes your bones right. Or if you have diabetes, you correct the diabetes gene and fix it so that it doesn't. Those things are now technically possible with some results. So what do? Right? Well, look, it's chemistry, it's biology, but it's both biology, because biology is the future. Next slide. Okay, so here's the CRISPR-Cas9. It takes the DNA, it cuts out some stuff and replaces it with the right kind of section in the gene. Well, that's pretty cool. Let's just take the scissors, cut out the bad genes, stick in a good gene, right? And now you got to put it back in the person, right, and do it. And you can do it by either replacing the genes in the person, or you can have a virus or bacteria whose job it is to go in and replace the genes, because that's what bacteria do. They take the cell's machinery and do it. And so it's so the bottom right one shows you what the cell configuration looks like, where it's going in there and snapping the people's off and doing it. Okay, so next slide. Good. So there are 10 simple rules to win the Nobel Prize. So it turns out Nobel laureates are asked this question pretty often. That's why Michael, I've been to several, like 3 or 4 different things with Michael Levitt, and he always gives as part of his talk what a great place he went to, because the leader brought in these people, and they ended up in this little institution having something like 14 Nobel laureates, right? Crick and Watson were there, for example, and they got the Nobel Prize, right? And so it's a little, so first of all, don't start your career looking for the Nobel Prize. Try and do the best science you can, right? So there were several people that were contributed to this from the questions that were asked, and it was written up by Philip Bourne of the National. Hope your experiments fail occasionally. Now, I used to have this attitude, which is, if you do enough adventuresome experiments, some of them are going to fail because it's too hard or it's too whatever it is, and that means you're taking enough risk if occasionally you fail. Getting funding got so hard, you were not really allowed to fail anymore, but you could do it. But what he means is when your experiment should come out a certain way because of the theory, and it fails, it means you should study and understand why it failed, because it's probably going to tell you, some really new important science. That's how some of the great discoveries were made. Okay? The other thing, this is the bad part. Collaborate with other scientists, but never more than 2 other people. That's because the Nobel Prize rules are, except for the Peace Prize, all the science prizes, it can go to no more than 3 people. If you happen to be the 4th, I was on a committee and we had 4 people that I and other members, I was chair of the committee, were convinced were worthy of getting the prize for this thing. And you can't give it to 4, you can only give it to 3, right? And it was a big problem, was trying to figure out which of the 3 out of the 4 we should give it to. It's a difficult thing, especially when some people had figured out that this thing was going on and were lobbying and so forth. Okay, if you want to increase your odds of winning, pick your family. There are families that actually are sequential in Nobel Prizes. And one of the people got it the year I got it. His father got it. His father was up on the stage in the United States too, celebrating that his son was getting it. Okay, so another good thing is work in the laboratory of a previous Nobel Prize winner. It turns out a lot of people get the Nobel Prize, work for a Nobel laureate, and they learn good habits, and they learn good behaviors, and that was an important thing to do. And they learn how to have the good ideas and to do things. Okay, so better than Rule 5 is the work in the laboratory of a future Nobel Prize winner. Because if there's only 3 of you, you'll probably get it too. See, I told you this was easy. All right, and always in design, execute your best experience at a time when your lurk is running high. Sometimes you're in the groove and you can do no wrong. That's the time to do a great experiment. It's like occasionally the lottery gets high and Nora's being lucky and stuff she's doing there. I tell her, buy a lottery ticket for us. Right? If you're, well, that's a little worse odds, right? Right? So never plan your life about winning a Nobel Prize. That's the same as number 1. And you should always be nice to Swedish scientists, because there's a whole complicated sequence of people getting nominated and reviewed and so forth. But in the end, there are at least 3 sets of people, always 2 sets of people, but usually 3 who go on. And then the Swedish Academy votes for who actually gets the offer, right? Especially if somebody it has happened that Nobel laureates have died just before the announcement. And then it's unfortunate, right? And, okay. And then the 10th one, which is easy, because I'm recommending this for the university, study biology. Chemistry is a field in which about half of the Nobel Prizes are actually biology prizes. So you got 1.5 times the chance of getting the Nobel Prize if you're a biologist than if you're a physicist or a chemist. Right? So, but I mean, you shouldn't be just doing this to do this, right? It's whatever. Next. All right. Here's another picture, a very recent one, and You notice there were a lot of women earlier. Women in biology have scored big in more recent years. These guys, they got the Nobel Prize for making a new tool. That is, they made a device that can make a light pulse that's 10 to the minus 12 seconds long, an attopulse. So you can see the electrons undergoing chemical reactions in living things by doing that if you don't fry the living things. You can actually see the quantum changes and the chemical reactions going on in live objects. So this is going to be a big tool. So the Nobel laureate, found the Nobel laureate choosers, they saw this is a great tool, we'll do that. Just like magnetic resonance imaging has gotten 3 different sets of Nobel Prizes for advances in technology and so forth. If it's something that's going to allow advances in sciences or allow something good for humans, then they'll do that. This other picture is a picture of Peter Higgs, who got the 2013 prize for the Higgs boson, and he was lobbying for one of his friends when we were trying to decide which 3 out of the 4 were going to get it. Next. Okay. So I have some that are rules. There were rules partly expounded by me and partly expounded by Charles Munger. I don't know if you guys know who Munger is. He was, he was the vice president of Berkshire Hathaway, and he actually realized you have to learn to think. That is, that humans have a lot of failures. But he said the first rule of fishing is to fish where the fish are. This is true in life. You don't go looking, for polar bears in the Sinaloa. Right? It's not a good place to find polar bears. This is true for many things in life. It's a rule, not just getting Nobel Prizes, but it's a rule for success in life. Right? So you have to recognize where the opportunities are. You have to do the hard work of checking to see what's been done before and what worked and what didn't, right? And also then look and see what is it everybody knows is true but isn't true, right? What do they assume is right but it isn't really right? And there's lots of examples of that, and I think there are still some around. I see some stuff that I'm suspicious of. And the other thing, and I learned this from one of my mentors, is what opportunities do exist from new knowledge, new things that we understand, or new technologies. If somebody just invented an nanosecond pulse, what experiment can I do first that can let me understand some incredible chemical reaction in human beings or mice or plants that I will understand what makes life the way it goes, right? So as that new technology, can I be the first one to apply it in a whole new way and make a great discovery, right? So you got to prepare, you got to be patient, you got to be disciplined, and you got to be objective. You can't love the answer too much. That's a human failure. Humans are bad scientists. They're worse at living, but they're really bad as scientists. They got to guard against the failures that humans have. And then the other thing that Munger liked to say, but I also understood that from the mathematician Carl Gustav Jakob Jobegi, he said, you've always got to invert the problem. That is, don't try and solve the problem forward, do it backwards and see what the assumptions of the flaws are so that you can look to see when going forward you're getting it right. Those are things that allow people to do it. It's just like one of my colleagues said, he got the Nobel Prize in chemistry because he worked on chemicals that were dangerous, smelled bad, or had some other big problem with it. Nobody else wanted to work on it. So he was the only one working on those things, and you went through enough, you find something, right? That's the issue. Next. Okay. So here are my shorthands again before I get into the 24 or 25 errors that everybody makes that you got to be lucky. No, I mean that's why you buy the lottery ticket when you're on the roll. It is why you do your best experiment when you got to be lucky. If nature isn't doing what you're looking for, you're not going to find it, right? I mean, nature is one that decides. You know, and you work really, really hard. I mean, that's the problem. It's easy to tell you how to get a Nobel Prize. It's not so easy to do all the hard work, right? So you also pick an area that's useful, ripe, and not so worked over. There's plenty of areas where people have been working on it very hard for very many years. Much harder to make a big step forward in that kind of a situation. They step forward, things usually get to a plateau, and there has to be some really novel or new idea that brings you to the next step up. And it's exciting when you're going for that next step. But on that plateau, it's a little boring because you don't make so much progress. All right? And here's, again, do the reverse problem, right? Invert, always invert. Reversing the problem can aid and figure out what the solution is. If you see what the answer is and you move forward back, then you can maybe see what the connections are and what you have to do, right? And this is the hardest one to teach students. Be confident that you can do and address the scientific question you're talking about. Then you check and you double check and you try and get rid of your biases because every human being has biases. Okay, so next slide. And so here's an example. On the left is the measurements of the speed of light from 1878 to 1983. Do you see anything about this? Does the speed of light look like it was constant with time, or does it look like it changed? How can it be that it looks like that the measured value of the speed of light looks like that? Well, the answer is you're very prejudiced. You like to see that somebody else got the same answer you did. Once you see your answer and their answer is the same, you don't look hard for any more corrections or things you need to do to check your answer. You get lazy, you get sloppy. And so what you see here is classically this thing. This is what my mentors used to teach me. You see the speed of light changing with time by amount that's larger than the error bars, especially in words of time. And then you see the answer staying jumped many standard deviations, that's many estimates of the error, and then went along, everybody getting the same answer. Does that mean the speed of light changed with time? Or does that mean the answer to the speed of light measurement changed with time? And the answer is it means the answer changed because people were biased and make mistakes. Okay, over here, cut off in the top, is a measurement of the Hubble expansion rate as a function of time. And I would have, something that fell off the end here, a plot of what is going on now. So there's all this discussion about the Hubble expansion rate. So in a minute, if we make it, I have a picture of my co-authors and I, Jorge Cervantes Cota and Salvador. We just published a paper on the history of the Hubble constant and what the Hubble tension is. And it's clear that people underestimated the error in the Hubble constant for a long time. I actually had an argument with Standage some years ago in a meeting when he said the answer is 42, and I said, what are the errors? And he said, we don't got no errors, right? We don't got no stinking errors, right? It's, I could not believe it because, it's a different kind of thing. So it's shown here in the bottom, and I have a thing. Now it's triangulated. There's 3 prongs, supernova, tip of the red giant branch, and the cosmic microwave background. There's 3 curves going out, like 3 separate things, where the people in each field get the same answer, but they get different answer between the different fields. Next. Okay, there it is. Okay, that's why I didn't have it. Okay, next. Okay, so there are 24 standard causes that I had, but I didn't quite finish this part of the talk because I was hoping that they would say stop by now. And, people are not linear thinkers. They don't solve algebraic equations. They guess and jump to answers. When you're driving down the street, do you do the calculations of the trajectory, or you just point and steer? Right? And the answer is you just point and steer. Most people are pointing and steering for their whole life. Only the most important problem do you actually try and figure out a little better, but most people don't even do that. So what psychologists do is they look and see how people make decisions, and they do it by reinforcement. And one of those reinforcements is incentives. And there are many cases where companies set up incentives and the result they get is exactly equal to the incentive because people optimize to get what's going on. So, for example, China gave everybody a month's salary every time they got a paper published or mentioned in a big journal because they wanted to get worldwide presence. And guess what? They got a lot of papers and comments. If you give people an extra month's salary, you know, they have incentive to do it. And so they do. Not all the papers are good or even right, but they got paid for it. So the biggest one that humans have is denial. If the answer doesn't agree with what they think it should be, they deny it. They say, is something wrong here? I better do the experiment again, or something like that. Or they just say, it's not right, and go on. And you see that in everyday life every day, not just once. You see it every single day, right? And so humans have all these things. And there is a consistency and commitment tendency. Once you get to where you like some answer, you don't want to change that answer, even if the real world shows you that it's not like that. You deny that the real world could be right. You live a different way. And it goes on and on. So let me do the next slide, just to show you I have most of it. So there's one of number 5 was missing. I didn't get these slides finished, right? Whoops. And so there really are 24, I think 25 biases that you can call out that you will see not only in people doing science, but also in people making their life judgments. You know, what they do in their life and everything. The first thing that people do is they keep doing what they were doing. The first response of people is, everything is the same. It's always been like this. Everybody's always had a cell phone. Everybody's always had a car. That's the first. The second response, I know I'm way over. The second response is the linear growth. I can see that things are changing. I can predict that it will change linearly. But the real world changes exponentially. And so that's the problem. All right. So next slide. I think I've gone on way too long. You know, Nora's waving me off. Keep going. Okay. So there's another good thing, and I had to show this slide. Have good collaborators. And it's better to have 2 or 1 collaborator because, you know, if you're going to get the Nobel. But I can't get the Nobel Prize again because I already got one. Okay. So on the left is Douglas Scott, a Canadian, University of British Columbia. And he and I have been publishing every 2 years an article reviewing the status of the field. Every day. You're going to hear something about this tomorrow, right? He is the nerdiest guy you ever met, but he really does his job seriously and so forth. And on the right is Salvador and Jorge, Mexico Vivo, and we've been writing papers for some time, and some of the best, you know, some of the heritage papers, because Salvador liked to write historical papers, and so we reviewed the whole field and that kind of stuff. So if you have good collaborators, that helps because they fill in and tell you about your own stuff. So next slide. I hope I'm running out. Okay. And this just tells you how you get selected. You gotta get nominated. You gotta get the nomination actually put forward. You gotta get a short list. There's an advisor review. It shows that it's a long bar. It actually is. The advisors meet a number of times, and then they're filtered down, and chair has to write a report and so forth. And then that goes, the short list goes to the Swedish guys, the Swedish scientists you've been nice to, and they choose which one of the 3 gets to get it, and the others are held as backup, right? And then they make the announcement in early October, and then yesterday you get the prize, right? And that's because it's the 10th of December is the usual time to get the prize. That's when the Nobel Peace Prize was given out, but yeah, because Friday is what they usually do it on. But. So this is all you got to do. It's no sweat to get a Nobel Prize. Well, it's a lot of sweat, but it's easy. You just do this stuff. What? Yes, oh, I'm going to say, Jorge was actually born in Sinaloa. He's a professor at UNAM, and he was supposed to come here because he wanted to be involved. But the big collaboration that I got him involved in is having the collaboration meeting in Hawaii right now. So I was sending him messages back and forth because our paper was selected to be the cover paper, and they want a little abstract and a cover picture. But he's in Hawaii instead of Sinaloa, and so, sorry, Omar. You could have been in Hawaii. But I think he would be glad to be in Sinaloa, but yeah. Okay, any more questions? Or do I got to mention my hot tie? So I have what I forgot the name. The sun god, Tomita. What? Tamatarasa. I have my Tomatoroso tie that I wore today, special for you guys, and because it's the Virgin of Guadalupe, right? Special day. But she was associated with the Aztec goddess. I've got her name. I can't. I've been too tired standing up here. Who's the Aztec goddess? Who was the Aztec goddess that was the precursor to? Okay. I'm sorry. My Spanish isn't good enough. Questions? Oh, God. I talked for too long.
Esta fue la disertación del doctor George F. Smoot, Premio Nobel de Física 2006, con la conferencia La Cosmología de hoy y la del mañana. Antes de iniciar con la sesión de preguntas y respuestas, vamos a despedir esta transmisión para Radio Universidad Autónoma de Sinaloa. En estos momentos mandamos los micrófonos con nuestra compañera Angélica Rodríguez y agradecer al auditorio de Radio Universidad que nos acompañó en esta transmisión especial. Micrófonos a cabina. Y nosotros aquí en el auditorio, si alguien tuviera alguna duda, alguna pregunta para el doctor, siéntanse con toda la confianza de hacerlo, los escuchamos. Aquí está mi compañero Alejandro, micrófono también allá con el otro compañero. Listo, ahí va.
Yeah. Well, I want to ask, because you talk about the advances in the science and how the technology will make the human not able to catch up to it. So, from a social point of view, doesn't the human fall behind even early than that? Because for our model, for our economy, we need to work to get the things that we want. And if the machines are doing all that work and they are getting the money for someone else, we don't have anything. We are useless. Even before that. Wait, I'm really nervous. I need to sit down.
Can we shorten it? I didn't understand every word. That's the problem. No, I mean...
The question was, is that are we becoming obsolete? Like when the machines are taking over, then what is the role of us as humans?
Well, you need to be a good citizen. That's the nature of what humans do is going to change. The jobs you have, what your role in life is, that's going to change. And so the medieval idea of what a liberal education, I don't mean liberal in terms of political sense, but liberal in terms of taking a bigger worldview rather than being cast in various caste, nobility and religious and whatever orders, that it's being a good and moral citizen, an ethical citizen, and setting up a world that makes sense. Because if you do things properly, then they will be plenty of economy and resources available by machines. You can do that. We have essentially enough resources in the world to provide electricity to everyone, to provide some medical care to everyone. Those resources, the amount of resources needed for that exist. And if we have good robots and good stuff, it will exist in abundance. That is, we can treat it. We can expect people to live much longer, and they have to figure out what can they do to live a rewarding life. Now, the question is, how does it make you feel when there are robots that are much smarter than you? Well, that's a problem. That's a psychology problem. That's a citizenship problem. And so humans finding what role they're going to be as humans, that's not going to happen in the next 20 years. The transition to that's going to happen, and it's either going to happen in a way in which the poor people suffer very terribly, and a few rich people do really well, or it's going to happen where the society gets to be a bigger and broader society. So many people define themselves by their job, but now you have to define yourself. The time will come 25 years from now, you have to define yourself by your character, and how you interact, your social ability and all that kind of thing. Now, it may take slower because people, the word sabotage. Sabot is a wooden shoe that the Dutch people wore. When the machines came in and took their jobs, they would throw their wooden shoes in the machine to sabotage them, right? Sabotage, right? And so there are people going to be sabotaging the robots coming in, and that will slow down things for everyone. There will be some countries that have a very positive view and want to go forward, and they will have economies that grow tremendously, and they will provide for their citizens in a reasonable way. But there's a problem. You have to study this, look up the Pareto principle, and see that if you give everybody the same amount, eventually wealth gets to be a power law, right? It's a natural thing that happens and various things. So that is the big task for the university and for every person, to figure out what is the role of humans when you essentially can have most jobs done by robots. We're at the point now where in many fields, robots could do 90% of the jobs, and humans need 10% of the humans are needed to work with those robots. The time will come when you don't need those 10% of humans, right? But we need smart, skilled people to work with the robots to get us to the utopia or the dystopia, depending on what happens. So the answer is yes, it's a crisis. It's why we need philosophers and need scientists and need biologists. We need to figure out what's the role that people are going to play in the future.
Muy bien. ¿Otra pregunta? Y saludar también a los jóvenes del Quali, del Colegio Quali que nos acompañan. Bienvenidos. Un aplauso para ellos, por favor. Muy jóvenes. ¿Son de secundaria o de secundaria? Bienvenidos.
Okay. Thank you, Professor, for being here and for the conference. I'm here. Okay, and so my question is, because we are living a very interesting epoch, because we have a Hubble tension. It's like an echo.
Yeah, that's right. I was covering my...
Can you hear me?
Covering my ear to get rid of part of the echo.
Can you hear me? Maybe it's better here.
No, try the microphone. Just hold it a little differently.
Yeah. Okay. Can you understand me? Yes? Okay. And so right now we are living a Hubble tension. And in previous Hubble tension that we have, we find a revolution. For example, the first Hubble tension give us understand in the physics behind the surface. I don't know why the sound is like that. And the second Hubble tension gives us an explanation for the accelerated expansion in the universe. And so my question is, in your point of view, what is the revolution that this Hubble tension gives us?
He didn't hear the second question. Can you help us, Rigo?
But it's the same. The problem no is not the English. The problem is the microphone. No, but I can. What is the revolution? The question is, what is the revolution that the present Hubble tension gives us?
Mejor me voy allí. Okay.
Can you hear me? Yes, it's better. And so in the previous Hubble tension, we find a revolution. For example, the first Hubble tension gives us an understanding in the physics.
George, what is the revolution that the Hubble tension is bringing us?
What is the revolution that what?
The Hubble tension that you mentioned at the moment. What is? Are we entering any revolution?
The
at all?
answer is new measurements and new techniques will come in, and somehow we'll find out that it is the same universe, and that, you know, the answer will resolve itself as new observations and new studies come in.
So Anna works in the Hubble constant measurement. So she said, well, what is the new thing? She's one of the drivers of the new methods and things like that.
No. Muy bien, sí.
Got the questions.
El día de mañana me están informando los organizadores, se va a tener la oportunidad de que todos los científicos que se encuentran aquí, los especialistas que están haciendo todas estas preguntas, puedan interactuar con el doctor de manera más cercana y en el auditorio de la FECA y continuar con todas estas dudas que surgieron en esta conferencia. Queremos agradecerles a todos ustedes. No se vayan porque queremos la fotografía oficial del evento y que nuestras autoridades le entreguen el reconocimiento al doctor George F. Smoot, Premio Nobel de Física, por la participación en la Universidad Autónoma de Sinaloa. Uno, dos. Doctor Candelario. Le pedimos al doctor Candelario Ortiz Bueno, secretario general de la UAS y representante del doctor Robespierre Lizárraga Otero, encargado de rectoría, haga la lectura del reconocimiento para el doctor George Smoot.
Es un honor para nuestra universidad contar con la presencia del doctor George Smoot. Esto es lo que la universidad hace, esto es lo que la universidad es. El trabajo cotidiano de nuestra universidad. La Universidad Autónoma de Sinaloa otorga el presente reconocimiento al doctor George Smoot, Premio Nobel de Física 2006, por haber impartido la conferencia magistral La Cosmología de hoy y la del mañana. Sursum Versus, Culiacán, Rosales, Sinaloa, México, 12 de diciembre de 2023. Firma doctor Robespierre Lizárraga Otero, encargado del despacho de la Rectoría de la Universidad Autónoma de Sinaloa. Gracias por su conferencia, doctor.
Muy bien, les pedimos a las autoridades nos acompañen con la fotografía oficial de este evento. Les pedimos a los presentes, si son tan amables, de ponerse de pie. Quienes están en los pasillos, si se pueden integrar, quienes están en las orillas, si se pueden integrar en los pasillos para que no se vean los huecos en los pasillos, de mi lado derecho, de mi lado izquierdo. De igual manera, los de la parte de arriba, si se pueden integrar al centro. Jóvenes, si pueden pasar aquí al centro, atrás, ahí mismo, pero en el centro. Al centro del auditorio para que se vea nutrida la fotografía. Y también quienes están aquí en el centro, si pueden integrarse, que no se vea ningún asiento solo. Más juntitos, más juntitos. Dos, tres, autonomía. Y a la cuenta de 3, somos grandes, somos guas, pero bien fuerte. A la cuenta de 3, 1, 2, 3. Somos grandes, somos guas. Muchísimas gracias y muchísimas felicidades, comunidad científica de la Universidad Autónoma de Sinaloa.